All right, so these are our circulatory system notes. Circulatory system. Function of the circulatory system is transport/circulation. So we are transporting or circulating things like oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood, nutrients like glucose, wastes, we need to get those to a place where they can be disposed of, immune cells like white blood cells, that's going to be important. So function of circulatory system, transport/circulation, oxygenated blood, deoxygenated blood, nutrients, wastes, and immune cells. So I believe we have talked about EKG, ECG before, but now is a good time to look back at it. So EKG, electrocardiogram with a K, that's the German spelling of it, German pronunciation, German form. Or ECG, electrocardiogram with a C. This shows the electrical activity of the heart. EKG, ECG, it's basically the same thing, and it shows the electrical activity of the heart. So this is going to be 311 and 312 specifically. And we're going to run through these pretty fast because we've already done most of it in PBS. However, we do need to refresh our memory. And so here on this first page, you give yourself a diagram of the heart, and you'll put yours directly onto the paper. I just put this in here because I need to give you a list of terms. So you'll draw yours directly on the paper, but on this heart structure, the things that you need to label are these 14 terms. And these are just in alphabetical order. Aorta, brachiocephalic artery, circumflex artery, left anterior descending artery, left atrium, left common carotid artery, left coronary artery, left subclavian artery, left ventricle, right atrium, right common carotid artery, right coronary artery, right subclavian artery, and right ventricle. Things like our left atrium, left ventricle, right atrium, right ventricle, abbreviations would be okay because you should already know that pretty well. Aorta, go ahead and write that out, and the rest of the arteries, write those out as well. Color would also be very helpful. So especially when we're distinguishing the different parts of these arteries, color would probably be very helpful in labeling. And then on the very bottom, coronary arteries provide the cardiac muscle with oxygenated blood. The coronary arteries provide the cardiac muscle with oxygenated blood. So these represent our coronary arteries here, and you're going to label those with the different names. Notice that they branch off of the aorta. So that is something to take note of and make sure that you add to your diagram. Okay. So 311 continues on and talks about blood vessels, which once again should be a review for us. Arteries, veins, and capillaries. So you will have a sheet that looks like this, and you need to label these different components of the artery, vein, and capillary. And so it is a little bit of a review, but it does kind of go a little bit deeper into what structures are involved. So I have artery structures, vein structures, capillary structures. Notice that there are going to be some structures that are common to both arteries and veins. So I have this underlined purple, I have this underlined green, because I like color to help me distinguish things. All right, so arteries. Specific to arteries is the fact that it has a thicker wall than a vein or capillary. Arteries have a thicker wall than a vein or capillary. The next structures are common to both artery and vein, so that's why I have them highlighted in both of the colors for artery and vein. The tunica media contains lots of smooth muscle and elastic fibers to control the artery's diameter. The vein also has a tunica media, but it's not going to be as thick. Remember, arteries have a much thicker muscle layer than veins do. The tunica externa is the outermost layer. composed of collagen and elastic fibers. Both artery and vein have a tunica externa. Tunica intima is the innermost layer of the artery or vein. It's the endothelial layer. The lumen is the space where blood flows. So again, these four components are components of both artery structure and vein structure. The biggest difference is that the tunica media is much thicker in the artery. There's a lot more smooth muscle in the artery than in the vein. The vein does have a tunica media, but it's not as thick as the artery. Structure specific to the vein. Valves in vein help the blood flow back to the heart despite the pull of gravity. So, muscles around the veins, especially in the lower extremities like the legs, they help to squeeze those veins, which pushes the blood up toward the heart. But then when they stop squeezing, gravity wants to pull back down. And so as gravity pulls back down, the blood hits those valves, and those valves slap shut so that the blood can't flow all the way back down. So valves are specific structures to veins. Capillary structures. The walls of the capillary have a very thin layer of endothelial cells. This helps these cell walls, this helps the vessel walls to be permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide. Permeable means that oxygen and carbon dioxide can move in and out. So capillaries have walls with a very thin layer of endothelial cells, which make them permeable to oxygen and carbon dioxide. Capillary structures do not need muscular walls. There is very low blood pressure in the capillaries. The function of the capillaries is gas exchange. So that's why we don't need that pressure anyway. Oxygen and carbon dioxide, they move by passive diffusion between the cells and the vessels. So oxygen and carbon dioxide move by passive diffusion between cells and vessels. And that's because they're very small molecules, so they can squeak between those little gaps in the cells, and they're going to diffuse through that very thin layer of cells. All right, so then you are going to label everything on these papers. This is both artery, both vein, both capillary. This is just cut in a different way so that you can see it. So several of these labels are going to be the same. It's just we're looking at it from a different angle. Okay. So 311, as you go through 311 on the PLTW site, you should also make a graphic organizer, and that would go here. And this graphic organizer should have labeled on it the major arteries and major veins as shown from that activity on the site.